Now, everyone's making it in film and TV, but we don't really know how. Here, we uncover the truth. Welcome to the Your Cinema podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Your Cinema podcast. We are well on our way, being consistent. I love it. The podcast is really the place where we explore the truth behind how our guests have made it. Because I feel like, and you hear me say this a lot, literally there's so many people making it now, but we don't tend to really see the key steps and the practical things that are happening behind the scenes, whether that's the networking they've done or the literal craft and the places that they've studied at, or just the long hard slog of being diligent in something for 5 to 10 years. So a lot of the times it's a mixture of all of that. But yeah, each week we're catching up with amazing leaders, pioneers in the space, and this week is no different. Our very special guest, is a writer, entrepreneur, a head of scripted development at Dare Pictures. She's worked at Warner Brothers, Marvel, Daniel Kaluuya's company, 59%, and so many more. She's also the co-founder of Black Women in Scripted, which we were
Yeah.
just having I want to say visceral. I really need to go to the dictionary and just make sure I understand what that word said. But I just love the sound of that word. Just talking about that visceral moment last year where they took over BBC Studios, which was amazing to see. I
Mm.
introduced to you guys all Cassandra Johnson-Bekoe. Boop, 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 boop,
Hello,
boop.
everyone.
Thank you for joining us today, Cass.
And
As
thank you
usual,
for having me, of course.
oh well, it's our pleasure. As usual, I'm gonna go straight in, and I think just even to give like context to people, right? I know I mentioned some things on the intro, but I really just I want to go straight in with writing, right? Because like in everything that I've seen from like your work, right, and your career, writing's played such a huge part, and it's like very central. So I just wanted to know, like, how did you start writing?
Well, I've always been someone who's like been very creative with words. I think a lot of people who know me say that even it comes out in my speech. And so, so obviously I started writing, I think when I was like 8, like properly, and we had like so many different exercises, and I was that kid at the back of the class who was like tasked with writing like a page on like Rumpelstiltskin, and then I'm coming with like an alternative story off the back of that like childhood, the childhood tale. So
Yeah.
I'd like remixed it and like come up with this whole villain origin story, and like I came across it the other day when I went to my mum's, because I was looking at this and I was like a 9-year-old kid, and I'd drawn little doodles and things, but I'd like written it, and it was like a 20-page thing. And it was like a big deal at the time, because like obviously my teacher framed it, like it had it up in
Wow.
the classroom, and then in year 6 when I was leaving, they gave it to me, and it was like my greatest achievement. And so I've always been like really passionate about characters and story and like world development. And as I like got older, that sort of became a through line in my life. Like I self-published poems when I was like 13. I was always
Really?
like entering into like rain dance writing competitions, and trying to get my work out there somehow. And this is even before I knew that like screenwriting was a thing. I just thought, oh, I wanted to be a novelist, because my biggest, I guess, inspiration is Mallory Blackman. So in my mind, I was like, I'm gonna be the next Mallory Blackman. This is what all of this is for. And then I did my A-level drama exam, and then my teacher was like, because part of our A-levels we had to write our own plays.
Hmm.
Like taking characters from like Brecht, like plays from Stanislavski and Brecht and all of those people, and then creating stories about them, and like like making like a family unit with these fiction characters, and I had
Yeah.
one, and then I had to perform it because at the time, I thought I could be an actor. So I was like performing it what I wrote, and I was like, I'm gonna do this for a living. What's it called? And my teacher was like, yeah, you could be a screenwriter, and I was like, oh, and then so that was like from like age 8 to 18 of like writing and then figuring out, oh, I could be a screenwriter. And that's truly when I started like going to like film courses, and then went to uni for film and TV production, and then obviously dropped out after a year, but then found my way to film school. But even at film school I studied screenwriting, so yeah, I guess writing's always been in me.
Wow. You know what? I love that. I love that. Like, yeah, like obviously you're completely right. Like writing has definitely been in you if you were, plotting out all the different plot points to Rumpelstiltskin. Um, I wanted to, even for further context, right? Could you just share some of the projects that you've worked on? Because it's not a joke. It's not. It's just not.
Well, I mean, I've been quite fortunate that I haven't yet had my own project as a writer,
Hmm.
but I thankfully signed with Curtis Brown in
Whoop.
2021. So I'm signed to
Yeah.
Sam and Ish there. Shout out to
Hmm.
them. But in terms of like script editing, which I always feel goes hand in hand for me,
Hmm.
my very first foray into production script editing was with Ted Lasso season 2, which
Wow.
was an amazing experience.
Mm,
And like there, that was the first sort of team I worked in that
mm,
allowed me to sort of marry the two sides of myself in terms of the writer side and my script editing side, because
mhm,
up until that point all the advice in the industry was like, keep it separate, don't mention that you're interested in writing because you won't get as many roles in development or even like production because you'll make people feel nervous, right? But then when I started on Ted Lasso, script coordinator, obviously the writing team are mostly Americans apart from me and Brett Goldstein, who's British.
mm,
And their approach is more fluid.
mhm,
And so it's like more of a collaborative process, right? And so even in like season 2, obviously there's an episode of the Ghanaian billionaire. Like
yeah.
obviously had to come into a room 'cause I'm from Ghana. So I had to, come into a room, and, we were talking, and I was just like pitching like things like, oh, he could be in tech or he could work in oil. And like, they were like, what sort of typical Ghanaian names? And I was like, well, my brother's name is Edwin and my dad's name is Francis. And we're like, we're going to go with that. And then that's the name of Sam Richardson's character, you know.
Wow.
And then I had to be like, Ghana versus Nigeria is a real thing. So we have to put that in the script because in the episode, it's a Ghanaian man trying to buy a Nigerian footballer. And I was just like,
Mm,
we need to make it make sense, because like the wider
mm,
population is going to be expecting like that sort of humor. And so they were
mm,
like, yeah, like tell us like, what's going on. And it was really great. And, my colleague at the time, Sasha Garan, she wrote the episode and she was brilliant at writing it. And it was just a fantastic experience. So from then onwards, it sort of just like expanded. And then I worked, like literally moved across to Marvel, worked on Secret Invasion. And it was the same sort of process because again, it was an American team, right? So I think my very first full length British production only came, I guess, last year April, when I was signed on to script edit for Chemistry of Death on
mhm,
Paramount Plus. Like that was my like first British production, and I was really grateful to basically be able to have a combination of the two, and
mm.
like realize that, oh, we have really different ways of working, but the outcome is still great. It's really interesting, I thought.
I love this. I love this. Now you've uncovered something, right? That I would love to understand and have more clarity on. What would you say is the difference between being a script editor and being on the other side where you're writing?
I would say, I mean, this is of course only my explanation, so please,
And also, and to add to that, right? What that advice that you got about, oh, don't tell people that you're interested in writing, like why is that a thing, which it sounds like is more mainly like a British perspective? So yeah,
Yeah.
the differences, and then why is that an issue?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my explanation of script editing is like you're sort of like the backseat passenger to the writer, isn't it? Like you're the one that's guiding them. They can't at the moment see all sides of like the direction they're supposed to be going. So you're the one that's sort of steering them into like the best possible versions of themselves. Because I always find that like script editing isn't about the script editor's ego or like, trying to enforce the storylines that the script editor necessarily thinks, oh, this should happen. But it's more
Mhm.
about making a conversation with the writer, and allowing them to like that sort of to and fro. And I find it like it's like a form of creative brainstorming, but a more I would guess intimate version because, a writer and a script editor is like you guys are a duo through and through. So I
Mhm.
always say to writers that make sure the script editor you work with like understands your overall voice and not just the show they signed on to work for because then you have like inconsistencies of the script, and it's quite obvious, where I'll watch something now and be like, I would have script edited this differently. You can sort of tell where a scene's gone on for too long or the characters are speaking in unnatural dialogue. It's like, it's not quite right. But yeah, that's what I class a script editor. And I guess with the writer, you are the driver. So it's like all the ideas are your own. Like when you pitch to a channel, sorry, not a channel, I would say a production company. When you pitch to a
Yeah.
production company and you've got all these ideas, you have to be really secure in what you're pitching and really understand the story you're trying to tell. And it sounds really obvious to say this, but I've had writers pitch to me and then I'll say, okay, let's talk again in a month. And then suddenly the story they're telling me a month later is slightly different verbally from how we spoke about it the first month. So then I have to be the one that's like referring them like, oh no, you said this character would be doing this. And they'll be like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I did say that. And that's how you can tell when a writer hasn't fully absorbed what they're writing, they're just writing.
Ah.
Obviously, of course, there are sometimes forgetfulness. We're all humans,
Mm,
but there
mm,
is a
mm.
difference, I think, between forgetfulness and not knowing your story.
Man. Wow.
So
Wow. Wow.
my my first I think my very first script that I let someone read,
Mm,
if like now I wouldn't let someone read that script as an example of me being
mm,
like, aware of myself. I sent a
yeah.
script out to a very high profile writer who was so lovely and gave me her time, Abby Morgan. And she gave me her time and read my very first script. And I read that script as I am today. And I was just like, this isn't I can't believe Abby read this because in this industry they only read something once. People say, "Oh
Ah.
yeah, you can send it to me again," but I'll tell you, they'll come back to you in 2025. You know what I mean? So for me, that was a learning curve of
Mm,
realizing that because I try, trying to get it to engage again, it's just not going to happen. She's too busy, and rightfully so. Um, I guess. I mean, is that? Have I answered your question at all?
yes. And more.
And
And
I guess,
more.
you were talking about the issue in terms of the
Yeah.
separation. So
Yeah.
if you look back at like everything I've outlined, this is where
Mm,
the issue comes in, right?
okay.
Because yeah, and I don't blame a lot of production companies. Some people just want you to do the job you're hired for. They
Yeah.
don't want you to come in and use it as a springboard to further your own ambition. Because
Mhm.
obviously, like in this industry and actually all industries, whatever company you're working for, like what the company's vision is the priority. It's not we make ourselves seem like seen and heard, but you
Mhm.
are working for a company.
Mhm.
And so from that aspect I understand, but it shouldn't be as black and white as it is.
Yeah.
And the only time I realized that there is a way for this to have work for me is I
Mm,
went to the script editors forum that Sky runs sometimes. This was held in Manchester.
mm,
And I listened to Jerome Buchanan Nelson speak because
mhm,
obviously he came from continuing drama series as a script
mhm,
editor and was like working on Bulletproof at the time. And he was
mm,
talking about like, wanting to be both, and like how he figured out a way to do it. And it was just being like authentic and sort of knowing your time when to sort of like reveal this side of yourself.
Yeah.
And he really inspired me. And from then onwards, I sort of started plotting. Okay, so, okay, so how am I going to make this work? It's
Yep.
working for everybody
Yep.
else, so I need to get my times.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah,
And it's paid off. And it's paid off. And paying. And paying
yeah.
off.
I mean, yes and no. I'll be very honest. Like,
Mm,
obviously,
okay.
it's a struggle of the industry. It's like you get so focused on like getting an agent, and I think most new writers are very focused on the agent, right? But then I think you have to also take time to really hone your craft. And I've been
Mm,
very fortunate to have some like two really great agents that have like worked with me for the past 2 years. Um, and have allowed me that space to develop as a writer and to continue, redrafting and writing and then sending things out and then getting the feedback, back. And they, give me notes, right, on my
yeah.
script whenever they read it, And honestly, I'm really grateful to Sam and Nish for doing that, because not all agents are like that. And that's not a slight, it's just about capacity, I guess.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
my time is coming. So watch this.
We're watching. We're watching. No, thank you so much. So like obviously you've worked with Daniel Kaluuya's company, Warner Brothers, Marvel, like so like a lot of like reputable and highly established organizations, right? How did you end up at Dare Pictures? Which is definitely, it's not a step down at all. I mean,
Of
being head of
course.
scripted is being head of scripted is a huge thing in itself. But yeah, how did that happen?
So I was introduced to Darren Milford through like a mutual friend of ours, and I'm really grateful to that friend actually, because what me and Darren have now gone on to create together in terms of the scripted arm of Dare is really impactful. And Darren's also like my mentor. Like I met Darren last year uh, because I was really keen to hone what I call the second like level of my development, which is my
Yeah.
business skills.
Mm.
And Darren has his own, Darren's like an institution. I feel, he's a founding father of Radio One Extra, has
Hmm.
worked over 20 years in journalism. So to
Hmm.
be working with Darren and all these years of experience is, I just felt like it was like just the right time. And obviously my time at 59% had come to a natural conclusion. And then obviously this opportunity came at the right time. And I'm really grateful for it. And this also has allowed me to continue that work that we were
Mm.
talking about before with new writers, because
Yes.
now I'm in this position, so I can, pay it forward to everyone who's ever given me a chance. And now I can do the same and bring more people up. I'm still learning on the job, and it's the added benefit of having your mentor be the CEO of the company, where I'm still learning. And all of us in the company, we all feel this sort of really nurturing and warm air. And it's like, I guess, one of the very few places I've worked that's allowed my creative juices to really flow, because we've been given
Mm.
that space to not run ourselves into the ground so yeah, I guess that it was sort of the right time for me to enter into a role like this. And I was just fortunate that it was like under Darren's tutelage, really.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I love that. One thing that I also noticed as well, right, Cass, is that you've got this arm and this thread that I noticed, right, where there seems to be in a lot of different places and projects that you've worked on, there's like this liking that you have for like new talent or developing it. Like what why do you think that is?
I think it's because I came through the industry, like, through the Mama Youth Project.
Hmm.
And what you learn during that, your time at Mama Youth is so invaluable. And I think at the time, you sort of think of it as the near future values, but
Mm,
actually what Mama Youth instills in you is like for the future as well, like it's in the
mm,
far distant future. And I'm now worked in industry for 7 years, and I'm starting to realize that the only way for this industry to continue thriving is for those of us that are ascending not to close the door behind us,
mm,
because like there's space for everyone. I mean, that's part of what motivated us to co-found, you know, Black Women Unscripted, is to allow people a space and a hub to congregate and feel seen and heard. And I was fortunate to have that at Mama Youth, and now have that that community feeling is very much in my bones now.
yeah,
And so I've always wanted to continue that thread. And so that's what you've basically traced is that, I guess, want for new voices to
mm.
know that there are people out there that are actually going to help you and aren't going to make you get out of your house at 9 a.m. to meet them in Soho for a coffee and then ghost you afterwards. There's real people. Because you know exactly what I'm talking about.
We've
I
all
was
been there.
yeah.
Oh,
But
I
it's
love
true, like,
that.
like if you're gonna meet someone, like ask them, do you have the financial means for this? Because I've been in that position where I had to use my last £10, like at the start of my career, to go to Elstree,
Oh,
because I was called for a general, and then in my naive mind, I thought, oh, this means I'm gonna get to be in the writers' room for EastEnders. No, it did not. It was just
oh,
like, oh, it's like, oh, this is a set tour, and I was like, oh, yeah. So this is also what I remember, right? Because if you felt that pain, then you know not to do it to other people.
beautiful. I love that. 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 Given, yeah, 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 yeah. No, I hear that, and I think I love the way you put that, right, because so many creatives will understand what that scenario that you just said, and it's that mixture of being hungry and willing to do what it takes to just further your career and make those connections. And sometimes you meet people for life, and sometimes you meet people that you don't really have a
Yeah,
connection with. It's
you
trial
don't
and
gel
error.
with.
Yeah, but then there's a reality of like, well, I can't be doing that 3 or 4 times a week, all the time. Like, even the reason why what you said is so amazing is because people know what it is when there's a meeting at 10 o'clock, and y- you have to travel across London at peak time.
Yes. Oh gosh. Woo.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, I mean, like I said, I'm from Streatham, so I was sat on a Thames link, all the way to Elstree.
yeah. That's like the other side. That's
like
far.
it's like literally south to like north, 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 north.
Yeah.
And so
Is
and
that probably like zone 6?
yeah, because it's
Yeah,
Boreham
yeah,
Woods. Yeah, so it's like
yeah,
Hertfordshire. You see, it's
yeah,
far.
yeah.
But it's one of those things where I guess also being in this position also now helps, because when I'm speaking to people now, I'm very upfront with them where like what capacity I have or what we can and can't do, so that it's I kind of leave the autonomy for people
Mhm.
to make that decision if they still want to talk, because I'm always happy to talk, but I
Yeah,
wouldn't want like someone to talk to me and like feel that something was promised that I wasn't probably aware of, because it happens. It's really easy to happen. Like
yeah,
miscommunications happen all the time. So I'm
yeah.
just always just been a very blunt and honest person, and I'll just always keep it 100.
No, thank you, Cass. Amazing, amazing. So right, given that like you've got this penchant for yeah, I like that word as well. For for new writers, right?
Yeah.
As well as like all the amazing people that you work with, what are like some of the key common mistakes that you feel like new writers tend to make?
I think I mentioned one earlier, which is like sending out your work before it's entirely ready. Um, I
Wow.
think, I think, I feel like it's really unfortunate for new writers because there's like this hidden pressure. Like despite yourself, you try and avoid it, but there's this like sort of pressure that like all writers put on themselves at the very beginning of that, like, oh, I need my script to go in the next year. So I'm just gonna be sending it out. I'm gonna send it out and send it out. And that works if the script is good. Which no shade. I'm not saying, every writer has put a lot of hard work into their work, so I always remember that. But is
Mm,
the script good? Like just like business level, is it good? Um,
mm,
and
mm,
9 times out of 10, they're not, because you can see it's been rushed and it's been just like, oh, I just need this producer to read it. You learn very early on in BBC Writers' Room when a script is good or isn't. And that's what that logic, I've applied it throughout. So that's the first thing I would say. Make sure your script's actually ready.
mhm,
Um, are you actually ready for an agent? Because that's another thing that I keep hearing, or like someone will ask me, like, how did you get your agent? How do you get an agent? And it seems like write a script, then get an agent. That's literally the steps that seems to be like, in the industry, that's what people feel like is the actual steps. But it's no, it's like, I would say it's, you know, write your script, leave it, go and do some other developmental projects where it's like maybe like collaborating with a friend on a script, or, applying to these short film funds and turning in like the script into a proof of concept and actually seeing if this can work.
mm,
If funds are an issue with that, you can always ask people to read. Like more writers need to ask more people to read their scripts before it like reaches my desk, for example.
mhm,
And just like when you meet with an agent, is this agent right for your tone of voice? Because the amount of writers I've seen over the years who are just like in and out of agents, or like, and that, there's valid reasons, of course, but it's oftentimes it's like, oh, my agent just didn't understand my voice, and I just didn't think they were putting me up for the right jobs. So, I'm moving. And it's like a job, isn't it? Like if you apply for a job in, like, let's say corporate world, you've worked there for 6 months and then you go for
mm,
another corporate gig, you know, it's not looking too good, is it? So
yeah.
same with like agents. It's like, unless there's an absolute valid reason, which is, between you and your God. But if
Mhm,
the reason actually is that, oh, they didn't understand my voice, and you've only been there 6 months, the other agent is going to be thinking, well, how long are you going to give me before you jump ship again? And in that
mm,
time, how much money are you going to make me for me to even sign you? So, where
mm,
you got a clean slate with the first agent who signed you on just your talent and your raw ability to write, now the second agent is going to be looking at your marketability and how long before you jump ship. So, now you've got two strikes against you before they get to your talent and your voice. And in some cases, reading that script and then thinking that it's not that deep. Bye. See?
wow.
You know?
Wow.
And I guess my final point, I'm trying to keep it to 3 points because we could talk all day about, writing tips. But I think my final main point is, don't be afraid to engage a script editor by yourself. Like there's loads of people I know, like a lot of my work has come from like my friends in the industry setting aside time and just giving me industry type notes. So now that's how my writing has evolved, is like having these people who are trained in this, writing trade or editorial trade of like script editing, or our development producers or our heads of
Mm,
development who
mm,
understand things at like a really insular level, have now read my script. So I know these notes are relevant to the climate of the industry now. And so if I don't
mm,
agree with it, that means I haven't really understood the assignment with my work, right? So obviously you take all notes with a pinch of salt, but chances are, if you are a new writer and the person who's reading your script is an exec producer at BBC Studios, hold tight, Maddie, um, that person knows what they're talking about. So what, because your career hasn't gotten anywhere yet. Let's we keep it real. Like you haven't gotten anywhere yet. And this exec producer who has worked and worked and worked probably sees about 50 people's scripts in 1 week sometimes. That's how much scripts we get in development sometimes. And
Wow.
then you're disagreeing with them and then pitching your script to a producer anyway. Set yourself up to failure.
I love
That's my
that. I love that. I love that because it's amazing. We're in this time of like loads of great stories from like our culture, our community,
mm,
etc. People are encouraged to be themselves, authored stories, blah 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 blah. So there's this dedication to authenticity, but then it seems there's that balance between, yeah, but there is still some beats and specific craft points that still can't be missed structurally. So yeah, be authentic, but these people know what they're talking about too, so
yeah.
find that balance,
It's a
because I
balance
guess it's,
for me.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a balance of like believing in yourself, which you should always absolutely do, but then
Mm,
also allowing room to grow and room to receive constructive feedback. And if someone is giving you their time who works in the industry, considering the climate of the industry and how so many people are at burnout stage because they're working so many hours a week, and then they read your script and then they give you feedback, that's someone who's already shown at that level that they already invested enough in you, because people can say no. So I always remember, like, if I ask someone to read my script, like, I always say, oh, thank you so much, and I'm always grateful that at least they gave me that time to consider my work or to read it enough to give me like constructive bullet pointed notes. That means they've thought about it.
mm,
So even
mm,
if it didn't go nowhere, or even if most of the notes weren't as, I guess, like, lauding as I'd like. Just the fact that
mm.
someone is like diving into my world and trying to help me make it better. That's what motivates me personally as a writer, to just like keep honing my craft.
I love this. This is amazing. This is amazing. Um, do you know what, right? So Cass, like at our stories festival a while ago, Ajani, we did a session with Ajani and John Petrie and Tanya Qureshi from BBC Comedy, right? And he made a good point that with in the development process of BBC, he had three
Mhm.
drafts that he could send them, right? The first draft wasn't well received. Um, notes, and his agent was like, "Look, this can't happen again. The next one has to be fire, right?" So
Mm.
what happened was the second draft that I believe the exec on Dreaming Whilst Black saw was the 30th draft. So they literally went back and
I didn't
they
know that.
studied, yeah, they studied like I think two or three shows that were similar in the style and maybe the tone and the journeys and stuff, and like they literally went and just surgeoned the thing, like, look, we're gonna make sure it's what it needs to be, right? um I wanted to know like what your thoughts were on this, and whether that's like typical, because I know Ajani, him and Ali, they're craftsmen when it comes to writing, so they'll do 100 drafts if they need to. But just in terms of like your perspective and experience, like, is that typical or yeah?
I think it depends. I think there's a difference. I think it depends, because if I'm submitting a script to a company,
Mhm,
um I'm open to like feedback, but if they actually say, oh, we would like you to make these tweaks and then send us this draft and then we'll
mhm,
consider it again, it
mhm.
depends how much I want to work with that company.
Okay.
Because otherwise I'm not going to do it, because I'm not getting paid.
Mm,
And I feel like unless you have written before or have a proximity to writers, I think
mm,
oftentimes people don't realize how much it takes out of you to dive back into script and then like make unnatural changes that didn't come from you. you know.
mm,
So
mm,
I guess in that
mm.
instance I wouldn't do loads of drafts. But
Mm.
I guess with Rajani, because it was the BBC asking him to do the drafts, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so with that, that's like the channel. So
Mm.
that's different because I know that if I make these changes, my show's going to be on this channel. So I will do it because it's a forward investment, you see. And I always try and apply things to a business sense. So I was like, okay, so this obscure company is asking me to do, I'm not doing it. But you know, Netflix want me to do like another pass on my 10th draft in order for it to be on Netflix. And you see Dreamworld's Black is on BBC, you know? So
Yeah,
this
got
is the
you.
thing. So
Yeah.
you have to think it's like peaks and troughs, isn't it? I guess
Mm,
everybody's writing careers like this anyway. It's,
mm,
you know, it doesn't go up and it doesn't, you
mm.
know, it doesn't go across. There's always a wave. So and also it depends how important that project is to you because I think with one of my projects, it is a money grabber to the industry. I don't know why I did, you know, inverted commas. It is a money grabber. Yes.
There we go.
And that is my script Guarded, which is
Mm.
literally a semi-autobiographical tale of my time as a bouncer because I was a bouncer for 5 years to pay for film school. So
Oh.
you know, that script has been doing the rounds since 2018, and I've redrafted it, and it's, you know, it's ready to go again, right? But that's not even a script that came from me, as in like I didn't even come up with the idea, like as well it is my idea, it's my life, but in
Yeah,
terms
yeah.
of the idea to write it, because I was writing some obscure love stories that no one cared about, and I thought this is the script, this is my script, this is the script that Abby Morgan read, was a very, it was a love story that didn't, no one cares about, right? So but that Abby, like, you know, facilitated a meeting with Fable Picks,
Mm,
and I had a meeting with Hannah there, and so she'd read that script, and now I know that it is a subpar script, right? But she read it
mm,
and invited me in for a meeting, and then I knew that this there was no interest in the script because the trick was that she said was so I read your script, I'd love to know more about you though, like your whole journey and everything, you know, because if someone likes your script, they're going to be talking about it. He was about to say, and then I obviously did my typical spiel of, oh yeah, I used to be a bouncer, and you know, I say for film school, and she was like, what, you were a bouncer? And I was like, yeah, but anyway, and I remember like brushing past that and like going on to the next thing that happened in my life at the time. I was like, yeah, and then I did this and I did this and I did this, right?
mm.
And then, you know, got an email from Hannah a week later, and she said, oh, you know, I've spoken to Faye, who's, you know, in charge of Fable, and we would like to explore the bouncer idea. And I was like, bouncer idea? You know, I was like, is I was like, there's a bouncer idea. And they're like, yeah, you know, because she used to be a bouncer, so we'd like to explore that idea. And that's an example of me ending up in this sort of position with a company just by happenstance, just talking about my life. And then, you know, I ended up working with them on Guarded for a year. And then like obviously that concluded naturally. And, you know, now the rights are back with me. But that
Mm,
was
mm,
like my
mm.
first foray like into writing. Um,
Wow.
I'm glad I had it then because that's what really, you know, told me that I could do this. But at the
Mm,
same time, I wish I'd had that opportunity like now because I probably would handle it a bit differently or be a bit more aware of the whole like process.
mm.
You
Yeah,
know?
yeah. Straight, straight.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Wow. I love that. I love that. What so what's happening with Guarded now then?
Is dead.
I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. I
As in guarded I mean, I've curated a mini slate of my projects
yeah, straight.
because I followed like Quentin Tarantino's like this is my set amount of projects that I have in me as like the creator and the driving force behind these projects, right? Doesn't mean that I can't hop on other people's work or anything like that, but these are my like projects from my heart. So
Mm,
Guarded is
mm,
obviously one of them, and Functional is another one of my scripts that is more of a drama. That is I won't give too much away, but it's about the black female experience in this industry. you know,
Wow.
not from me, but from Tails. And I genuinely mean not just from me. There's I like just I mean that
Yeah.
like functional is actually how for me how Black Women Scripted actually the nucleus of Black Women Scripted came from that script functional because I'd written this script in COVID and was like, I want to write about all these experiences I've received from my peers who are Black females in this industry and are like stuck in development assistant jobs for 5 years and no progression and like have been writing and writing on shows but no one is greenlighting their original material. And so I sent my script to Maddie and then we spoke about the script and then we spoke beyond the script when I and then we realized that there's an actual need for support. So it's funny, like my script spanned
Yeah.
and it also like, the idea was already there for like Maddie and Farah anyway. But my
Yeah.
motivation for like co-founding Black Women Scripted genuinely came from my experience of speaking to Black females in this industry, writing the script, and then realizing that I don't want to just capitalize off people's trauma. I want to be
Yeah.
able to help, fix it. So let's do this.
I love that. Do you know what? That segues nicely, perfect even. Like, yeah, tell us for those that don't know, and have been living under a rock, what is Black Women in Scripted? And what do you guys do?
So Black Women Unscripted is a collective of anyone and everyone that is a Black female that works in scripted. And I mean
Mhm.
like makeup artists, we have script editors, we have writers, we have producers, but we also have lawyers and we have accountants who work in industry. And that visibility of like having all these different roles in like one, because like currently we operate as a WhatsApp group and we also have a LinkedIn and Instagram, but
Mhm.
having all those roles connect with each other is really key because it's bringing visibility to the work that Black women are doing in scripted that often gets just reduced to the writers and who's working behind the camera.
Mhm.
And now I've had so many people feedback to me that it's like the hub. If you're looking for some inspiration or looking to speak to people who look like you and work in scripted, and because we all have that moment in scripted, no shade, but you work in scripted and you have, am I insane? Did this happen? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, is this just
Mm.
me? Is this like, does this happen to everyone? I'll pause for the, but yeah, I was like, does this happen to everyone? This is just me. And like, I feel like a lot of people have told me having Black women in scripted there, they can speak to people and like figure out healthier ways of dealing with a
Mm.
situation and having that support to come back to at the end of the day and say, hey, this is how it went, and someone like people still care. Or like,
Yeah.
oh, they have a short film and they're looking for a Black female producer and they're in this group and are exposed to producers of all different kinds of calibers, like like it's just a brilliant group. And how it's evolved in the last 3 years is definitely exceeded like mine, Maddie, and Farah's expectations. Like it's really grown. We've now got over 350 members. We're looking at like different initiatives to do. We also have done two successful partnerships with like one with Curtis Brown and one with Casarotto, where we would like just basically matchmaking new writers with agents. And off the back of it, three of our writers have been signed from those initiatives, which is a really great percentage considering
Yeah,
how
that's
hard it
huge.
is right now,
Yeah, 100%.
and then obviously the mixer happened last year, which was
Yes.
just incredible. We had over 100 Black women in
Mm.
the BBC space, like television centre, historical BBC space, and it was just Black women who all have a common, like we all have stuff in common because we all work in scripted. And so suddenly though, like you're able to talk about anything and everything, and then you're realizing all these old connections. Like I reconnected with someone I went to acting school with 10 years ago, like it's like who's now also working in the industry, and I was like, oh my god, that's where you were. It's just like, sis, I've been alone, and I was like, well, we're here. It was just really cool. It was really beautiful.
I love that, man. I love that. I love that. Well, cast. Yeah, no, no. I am so happy that we've caught up today. And long may Black women in scripted continue to flourish,
Amen.
and provide that support because it's needed. And yeah, we'll definitely be talking about, like if there's anything that we can do from the Your Cinema side, but also like you're an inspiration and your journey. I love it. I love it, and long may that continue as well.
Yeah.
Because yeah, we need more people like you who are great at what they do, but then also aren't afraid of helping the people coming up and pulling them forward too. So
Thank
amazing.
you.
Thank you.